be able to spend the morning and part of the afternoon being able to talk for hours about why girls matter. It seems a bit like a silly question to pose to a porch full of such dynamic and, dare I say, courageous, competent, and confident girls and just amazing women. I mean, the girls here really take the time to get to know the women sitting near you. These are some impressive professional females, so we are quite lucky. But I'm going to just spend the next 15 minutes, maybe even 10, we'll see how nervous and fast I go, trying to talk a bit about girls and what we at Meredith have learned about girls in a report that we put together called The Status of Girls in North Carolina. My own career has been very centrally concerned with inspiring, hopefully, and definitely being inspired by girls and young women. So prior to getting my PhD and becoming a professor down the street, not at Peace, lovely school, but at Meredith, I know there's many Meredith alums crawling around this executive mansion. Kristen and I just had that talk. I worked at Girls Incorporated. I was the director of middle school programming there, and after leaving Girls Incorporated, I worked on a statewide campaign in California attempting to reduce teenage pregnancy. So obviously at Meredith, of course, I get to work with lots of amazing young women, and I was able to head up our team that worked on preparing the Status of Girls report. Just looking around this space, we know that there are tons of amazing researchers and organizations that are doing work on behalf of girls and women. So in trying to put together our report, we weren't trying to step on anyone's toes, but much of the work that is done learning about girls, learning about young women is either age specific in its focus, like looking just at preschoolers or looking at teenagers, or maybe topic specific, like what I used to do working on teen pregnancy prevention. So what we tried to do was bring together the data to kind of try to provide a somewhat comprehensive portrait of how girls across our state are faring, right? And the report, I think, highlights a lot of things to be encouraged about. You are an impressive group of young women, but it also points to some areas in which we can do more to support the increasingly diverse population of girls across our state. So females make up more than half of our state's current population, and 1 in 8 North Carolinians is a girl under 18. So there's reason one why girls matter, right? You have volume. So we're going to do a quick quiz. If you're following along on your PowerPoint, the handouts, that's fine, but don't look ahead. So I am a professor, no cheating. Okay, so you just shout out your answer. The majority of girls under 18 in North Carolina are A, white, B, African American, oh, I changed my answer orders, that's all right. C, Latina, or D, multiracial. What do we think? White. Any other? Yes, that is correct, right? This is true across all age categories, right? Our two largest racial groups in North Carolina have been and continue to be white or Caucasian and African American. But if you look at the sort of figure 2 in your pamphlet, you can see the ways in which the demographics of our state are changing. The share of girls of Latina origin and those identifying as multiracial is growing, while the relative percentage of both white and African American girls, especially you can notice this when you look at the population of girls under 5, is declining. Again, still the majority of girls and just people in our state are white and African American. Those are going to remain our largest demographic groups. But I do think it's important to note that our demographics are shifting, and this I think should shape the way in which we think about how to support our population as we move forward. So while girls make up about 12%, that 1 in 8 number of the state's population, they make up over 17%, or about 1 in 6, of North Carolina's poor. Obviously, this is not what we want for any of our children, but not all girls are equally at risk for living in poverty. So as you can see in figure 3, and I know these slides are tiny, so don't worry about it. I'm happy to make them available, or you can download the whole report if you are so inclined. It's short. Our marketing department made sure of that. They didn't let me professor it. So it's very short, it's very readable. So 1 in 3 African American, Latina, and American Indian girls ages 5 to 17 is living in poverty. And that number jumps to nearly 50% among girls under 5. Right? So poverty rates don't affect all of us equally in North Carolina. One of the biggest buffers against poverty is, of course, education. So in the 2012-2013 school year, more than 2/3, so 66% of girls in elementary and middle schools passed their end of grade exams. This is fantastic. However, the passing rate for these EOG end of grade exams was lower among African American, Latina, and American Indian girls. These are the exact same groups with the highest poverty rates for youth. So, for those of you following along, you know it's time for another quiz, right? You're not getting graded, it's fine. So here's my next question. Does the educational achievement gap by race, that's what we call when different racial groups are have different passing rates. We're just looking at EOG here, EOG scores. So does this gap that we see by race increase, decrease, or stay about the same as girls move from elementary and middle school into high school? What do you think? Does it increase, decrease, or stay the same? The gap. It doesn't. It decreases. So this is fantastic, right? We don't know the exact mechanisms by which this decrease is happening, but if you look at, I don't remember the figure number, while the educational achievement gap persists into high school, we're just looking at end of course scores now. So in high school we have a different measure, but looking at end of course scores, you see that the gap narrows by race. So this is great, right? And overall, a much higher percentage of girls in high school are passing their end of course exams. There's probably some selection effect, right? Who's electing to take these courses? These are probably fairly high achieving youth. But this is really great news, and ideally something that we can build on, right? That this group might have some ideas about. Girls perform on par. I don't need to tell you this, but girls are performing on par with boys on looking at end of grade or end of course exams. This is true regardless of grade level or subject matter, including math and the sciences. So this is also a bit of shining news. We're going to be hearing a lot more about this later from Dr. Hilton. Did I get that right? Yes, thank you. But right now, girls make up about half the student body at North Carolina's STEM-focused high schools. And part of the effort to promote STEM education among young women is to counter this stereotype that girls are either not interested in or not skilled in math and the sciences. But we can see that girls in North Carolina are overcoming this stereotype. And I know this is another area that we want to focus on and build capacities or competencies among our girls. But there are some concerns here. Nationally, only 1 in 5 of those taking an AP exam in computer science is a female. Students in North Carolina taking the SATs in the 2013-2014 school year, girls and boys performed on par in the critical reading and verbal portions, but boys outperformed girls in the math portion of the SATs. Right? So there's room for us to build, right? There's room for us to grow. But overall, academically, girls in North Carolina are doing very well. We know that girls need more support in the STEM fields, and some groups of girls might need more early academic interventions, right, to get those EOG passing scores up. Next, we're going to look at media a little bit, some social media, right? One of the places where these kinds of stereotypes that girls aren't good in math, right, or girls aren't interested in science. One of the places where these kinds of stereotypes are perpetuated is, of course, the media. Youth today spend more and more time on their computers, and as as Kristen Fields already talked about, on our other devices, right? And this is not to the exclusion of traditional media. Though rates of consumption have decreased over the last 5 years, the average girl in middle school, over 40% of you, I know there's some middle schoolers here, report spending over 3 hours a day watching television on a school day, right? So not on a weekend, on a school day, when you don't have that many hours after school, right? So what we know kind of anecdotally, meaning it's not statistically proven, is that teens are consuming television while also engaging with other devices, right? You're very proficient multitaskers. My students in college tell me this all the time. They all do their reading and their homework while watching TV, texting, possibly sending out some tweets, right? All at the same time. How are you reading? They tell me they can. I'm not clear about how this is possible. I know I couldn't. But nationally, over 80% of teens report using online social networking sites such as Facebook and Twitter. Over 95% of teens use the internet, and almost half of American teens have purchased something online. So you all are quite proficient in navigating this kind of what we call new media landscape. So, next quiz question. True or false? Male teens in North Carolina are more likely than female teens to have a Facebook account. You are very smart, very competent, right? In North Carolina, 53% of teen Facebook users are females. Females between 13 to 18 are 20% more likely than their male counterparts to have a Facebook profile. I know Facebook is not the preferred platform anymore now that people like me are on it, right? People like you are not. Though most of you report, at least most of my college students report having a Facebook account to communicate with their families, right? So, but Facebook makes their data available, so it's easy to pull their data. We know that girls are using social media to connect with peers and participate in online communities. They're finding their voices through blogging, right? Girls sometimes will report, Pew Research Center has done a lot of research on this, and they say that girls report feeling more confident and courageous, right? Using online platforms to talk about things that they wouldn't necessarily feel able to talk about, particularly in mixed gender classrooms, right? So I think that the expansion of technology provides a lot of potential opportunities for the empowerment of young women. But of course, for all the parents in the room, well, I guess we're not in the room, for all the parents on the veranda, there's a darker side to social media, and this is probably what a lot of us are worried about. 1 in 5 high school females in North Carolina, and 1 in 4, 25% of middle school girls in North Carolina reports being cyberbullied or harassed through new media technologies. So this includes texts, social media, instant messaging, and email, right? So we definitely need to find positive ways for girls to participate in the online world that I think can be a really empowering space and help girls figure out how to protect themselves from the disempowering elements. All right, the last thing that I want to highlight about the girls of North Carolina is your leadership. And I know that's the meat of what we're probably going to be talking about today. This is something we as researchers need to know a lot more about from a data point of view. But I will tell you a little bit about what we do know and what we were able to find out. All right, last quiz question. Girls and young women in North Carolina are more likely, less likely, or as likely to volunteer than their same-age male counterparts. Are girls more likely, less likely, same? More. That's right. You all are more likely to volunteer. As you can see in Table 8, there's a lot of data there. It's very small. I have no idea if you can actually see it. I can't, but maybe you can. The young women of North Carolina are very actively engaged citizens. You are volunteering. You are voting, those who are legally able to vote. You are joining clubs and groups, and you are donating to political campaigns and causes that you care about. And you're doing this at higher rates than your male counterparts. The one notable measure in which young men And I will note that this data covers young people from 16 to 29, right? So this is not just looking at teens, which the rest of our report really is focused on girls under 18. The one place where young men outperform young women is in having political discussions. Right now, on this veranda, are a number of really important female leaders. So not right now because I'm talking, but right after I'm done, turn to the people in your row and have some political discussions, right? You are in a veranda full of important women, right? So don't be afraid to have that talk. Be courageous. So we may not always want to talk about it, but the girls of North Carolina are political leaders. In very preliminary data that we gathered this summer, and we're not done collecting the data, but we found that girls in North Carolina high schools make up more than half of the student government leadership ranks, right? Yet another reason why girls matter. You are leading in your schools, right? So the last thing I want to say about leadership is that North Carolina high school females are participating in organized high school athletics. One additional form of leadership, I think a really important form of leadership, in record numbers. So since the 1990-91 academic year, there's been an increase in the number of both male and female high school athletes in North Carolina, but as a percentage of students, it is the young women in high schools that are increasing their relative proportion, right? So you all are more engaged, more active in high school sports even than your male counterparts as a proportion of the student body. So I think there's a lot of amazing stuff happening among girls across our state. You are powerful, competent, courageous, and confident in so many ways, but there is still work to be done, and I know that's what we're going to be talking about the rest of today. First off, I know I have work to do. One of the main things that we at Meredith are attempting to do is find better ways to measure all of the ways in which you, girls, and the rest of the girls in North Carolina are leading in your schools, in your churches, and in your communities, right? We really want to capture more leadership data. We felt like this was one of our big kind of holes in our report, was having this good leadership data. So we have some ideas. I would be happy to hear from any of you if you have ideas about leadership data. I was fortunate enough to be able to speak to the board of the Council for Women last week, I think it was. They had lots of ideas for me. So, I've been taking that back, and I work with undergraduates on collecting this data. So that's one of our major jobs before we put out the next version of the report, is collecting more leadership data. But there are other kinds of concerns, of needs, and of ways to support the girls of North Carolina. Though the gap, as we talked about, diminishes somewhat as girls move into high school, a substantially lower percentage of African American, Latina, and American Indian girls are passing their EOG exams in science and math, but especially reading, right? And reading is fundamental to everything that comes after. Related to this, I think it's really important to note that not all girls are living in homes that are economically secure. Research has shown that poverty is linked to diminished academic performance, worsened health outcomes, and less what we call pro-social behaviors like volunteering, like donating, that kind of stuff. 1 in 2 American Indian or African American girls under the age of 5 in North Carolina is living in poverty. Over 40% of Latino girls under the age of 5 is poor. Part of helping girls to succeed is supporting families, all families. Girls succeed where families succeed. And successful girls become successful women. We, on this gorgeous veranda, know that when women succeed, our families are stronger and our communities are stronger.